Right, thank you very much for joining us again today. Today, Sunday, the 14th of August, 2022. My name is still remains Samuel Oludari Yerokun, and you are getting us streaming from Scotland. That is OY Media Scotland. Today, we will be coming with our guest, our usual guest. That is Alagba Femi Odedeyi, and he will be talking to us about wigs. There's something specific we're going to talk about today, and that part is the Yorubas, the Yoruba students, and their involvement or lack of involvement in the liberation movement. Of course, also we'll be looking at the letter that was written by Pa Akitoye to the president of Nigeria, Major General Muhammadu Buhari. Please do stay on with us. Yeah, you're welcome on the program, Alagba Femi Odedeyi.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Today, just like we put on there, we will be talking about Yoruba students and Yoruba liberation. For some time now, we've been hearing about the several movements within the Yoruba liberation caucus. In fact, it was reported that there are over 100 groups that are in their own part pushing for Yoruba liberation, from the ones that believe that there should be a UN conducted referendum, to those who believe that there shouldn't be any election, both in Osun and Ogun states, which has passed and gone, to the ones that align with the force majeure that was declared, that as of now, that Yoruba is no longer under the constitution of Nigeria. I mean, that's the belief of one group. And we have another group that which are pushing for the presidency of a Yoruba person, which is Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Also, we have some that believe that it should be about restructuring and not about any Yoruba being in position or Yoruba leaving the country. I mean, living and becoming a country on its own. But also we have, like your group, the Yoruba Referendum Committee, which believe that it should actually be a rearrangement where we have a weak center, or probably maybe to call it a weak center, maybe it's too strong, but that power should actually reside in the regions where there is an administrative center where each of those regions will appoint a representative or elect a representative to that center. And that's the one you are talking about, referendum being conducted through the instrument of a bill and being passed to law by the state houses of assembly, which your group has already submitted a bill to all the 6 Southwest houses of assembly. So there are many groups in the liberation movements. But what has been lacking is most of these groups that have been very vocal is that we don't have a student group, except I'm not getting my fact correctly, but as far as I know, and with the information that is available to us, there's not been a group that is being championed by students, Yoruba students, geared towards this liberation, whether they agree with the others or not, or just creating their own path, but we've not been able to identify any. Meanwhile, in our histories, we know that Nigerian students are very active, especially when it comes to issues like this, whether at the national stage, whether within the states, and even internationally. I mean, we have history of Nigerian students being involved in the liberation movement for South Africa and some countries around that zone. So what exactly is happening? Why are the students, the Yoruba students, and when I say student, I'm talking about the students in our higher institutions. Why are they not involved, despite being a very impactful group?
Uh, yeah, to a large extent, I think they are involved in the sense that, but not formally. That is, not formally as a student body. Most or some of the 100 groups that exist have students or student activists among them, and
Right.
they do go into the higher institutions. They relate with students at different levels, but what is happening is that we don't formally we don't have a formal student movement anchored on Yoruba liberation or even self-determination or autonomy, whatever it is. And that is a little bit unfortunate because, yes, if we trace the history of student activism, even during colonial times, student activists in London, the West African Students' Union, they were very instrumental and influential in the eventual evolution of the anti-colonial struggles. And if we come back to where, the Nigerian situation, it was the Nigerian students actually that initially came out. There was an Anglo-Nigerian Defense Pact after independence, where Britain wanted to have a sort of military base inside Nigeria. And it was the Nigerian students that came out against it, backed by the opposition at that time, which was the Action Group. And then subsequently, the anti-military struggles, the the democracy struggles, the NADECO, the anti-Abacha, and all the rest. So you find a lot of the student unions. In fact, that was one of the reasons why the original students' union, National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS, was banned by the Obasanjo regime. But immediately they banned it. I think it was in 1978 because of the protests that the students held at that time. I think it was against fuel subsidy or increase in fuel price in 1978. So they banned the National Association of Nigerian Students. But the students came out again and formed the NONS, what we now know as NONS, National Union of Nigerian Students. I hope I'm not mixing up the two names. I think it was NONS, National Union of Nigerian Students, that was banned, and then it became National Association of Nigerian Students, NANS.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So it was NANS that now took over from 1978 on, and all the anti-petrol subsidy and all the rest. So they were very much involved, but all those involvements were on a what we call a pan-Nigerian level, because essentially they were also responding to a pan-Nigerian situation. Uh, the unfortunate thing in the student movement is in not recognizing where the strength of Pan Nigeria is, and that's been their undoing. First, when they went, with this Pan Nigerian activism and all that, their teachers, the lecturers on campuses and stuff like that were also instrumental. In fact, there was a synergy between the teachers and the students because they hold seminars and do that, and teachers influence them. That was again when NONS was banned. Certain lecturers were also dismissed from the universities by the same Obasanjo regime. And the main accusation against them was that they were, quote unquote, I'm quoting Obasanjo now, they were dismissed because they were teaching what they were not paid to teach. In other words, the lecturers and teachers that were sacked without benefits were the most influential among the students' movement. and the military regime at that time saw them as a threat. Then they moved one step further by now uh, separating the academic staff union, which was the lecturers union, of which these people are members, and which was also a thorn in the flesh of the military. So they separated it from the National Labour Congress. They are no longer part of the National Labour Congress or Nigerian Labour Congress. So the influence that the academic staff union had on the student movement began to wane. And then by the time in the 90s, when the students, the most active ones, started graduating and this and that, there was no continuity in terms of their activism as students. Now, why I said they were looking at the Pan-Nigerian thing to sustain itself, and that was their undoing, was that one of the strengths of the Nigerian student movement, when it was even NUNS, National Union of Nigerian Students at that time, on several campuses, especially in the western part, they had Black consciousness movements on those campuses. Those Black consciousness movements were, modeled on the anti-apartheid that you mentioned, anti-apartheid, Black struggles, Black power, and all the rest of them. And they were the ones that fueled the student movement on those campuses. So a lot of times, it is discovered that the leadership of the student movement on a campus rests on the activities of groups like, they call themselves different names: Black Consciousness Movement, Black Identity, Pan-African Student Movement, all kinds of stuff like that. So, but once those were taken out of the struggle itself, the student movement became a shell. And that is what has been happening, because when they look at Nigeria from an abstract, as an abstraction, Nigeria. But the reality they face is that those who are causing the problems in Nigeria are not looking at Nigeria as an abstraction. They look at it from their ethno-national perspectives. And that is the basis for their contestation for power. So that's why you find them talking about rotation, about zonal zoning, about power this, power that, So there's nothing quote unquote pan-Nigerian about the contestation for power. So when they get to power and then they start messing up as they have always been doing, it is difficult to organize a pan-Nigerian response outside the context of the nationalities that these people rose to power on. They rose to power on the basis of that ethno-national contestation. So any opposition or anything that wants to challenge it must also have its own component, because that is where the issues can actually be addressed within the nationality. So because of that dissonance, you now have, I think after Abacha, I think the thing started really under Abacha and Nadeko and the return to civil rule. Then you find the influence of Nigerian students winning. And then, of course, the usual stuff in Nigeria that, they have bought this, they have corrupted that, they have done that, there are all kinds of stuff like that. Okay. But the Yoruba Liberation Movement, most of the, we say about 100 groups and stuff like that. I'm very certain that at least 80% of the leadership of these groups were products of that student movement at that time. That is the pre-90s student movement. They were the ones that were originally involved and kept alive the Black consciousness movement. Sometimes they call themselves innocuous names like public awareness Alliance of Progressives, all kinds of names like that. So I'm almost certain that 80% of the leadership of those 100 groups were products of the student movement at that time. In fact, I think it was during Abacha, there were two particular movements, Odua Liberation Movement and Odua Youth Movement, which were formed early on in 1993 or 1994. I'm not sure. They are still existing among the 100 that I mentioned. Their leaderships were directly from these student movements, Kwara Polytechnic, or I think they still call the name Kwara Polytechnic, University of Ife, University of Lagos, and all that. So these were student activists who saw the need to address what we now call the national question in Nigeria, and they formed movements along that line. I think they are still existing, and they will be counted among the 100 that we are mentioning. So, so that's why I said the students were part of it, are still part of it. It's just that it's not in a formal sense. And then we will remember when the Barapa stuff, Igongon stuff happened, and Sunday Go and all the rest of it. There were some students from the University of Ibadan who were actively involved in what was going on in Igongon at that time, and they actually make intellectual contributions, where that is they appear on programs and stuff like that. So it is the formalization that is the problem. So the question now is whether formalization is necessary or not. That is a question we now have to address. And I remember, as it is now, the students cannot run away from it, even in a formal sense. In a formal sense, yes, they will go to and say, "We are all Nigerians." They want to do, yeah, they can contest their leadership, student union leadership, and say we are not this, we are not that, we are all Nigerians, and and things like that. But the thing is, the situation, what Nigeria is facing, is a general problem with particular contexts. That is the question. It is that particular context that mandates ethno-national, let me use the word ethno-national student unionism. It is that particular context. So they can't, that's why I said in a general sense, they can't paper over the ethno-national context when the issues they are facing is ethno-national. It is not pan-Nigerian, it is ethno-national. And we can see it in every electoral cycle. And we can even see it today as what is happening today. So ordinarily, the students should not shy. But like I said, it's a question whether it should be formalized or not. Two, most of the groups have student activists within them. Three, most of the leadership are active students or even postgraduate students. So I think it is not, if we can resolve that, whether it should be formalized or not, I think that's the basic question. Yes.
Okay,
but
thank you.
If one of the major problems would be if we have 100 different organizations that cannot be formalized into a single, how can the same organizations that are led by students or with student involvement formalize a student movement? So the problem for the student movement is also the problem of the entire liberation movement itself. So it's a question of formalization of the liberation process. How is it going to take place.
I mean, and that is like generally if the 100 plus are able to formalize, then it will be easier for the
For the
for us to
student
talk about a
company,
student.
yes, yes, yes.
But in terms of formalization, um, is it even possible? Is it possible?
Uh, well, I think the question should be: is it necessary? I
Okay.
mean, anything is possible, anything is impossible, in a sense. Uh, but is it necessary? I think
Okay.
that should be the focus, because if we say it is possible, and it is possible and it is necessary,
Right.
then the question will be, okay, those organizations outside the campus, is it possible for to formalize, or is it necessary to formalize? So what we have seen outside the campus are situations where they will form one central body, what they call the umbrella organization. They will form one central body. Within a short period of time, that body will fight and split up and form another parallel body within that one. So everything just keeps on splitting up. So the answer would be yes, it is possible. I mean, the answer is yes, it is possible. The further question would be, is it necessary? Because if we go, like we said, we have 100 organizations, and many of the leadership are previous student leaders, and yet they are splintered into 100 pieces. So if their influence on campus is going to be relevant, we are going to have probably 100 student movements, all saying the same things about Yoruba liberation. So, the, the best answer I can give is, yeah, it may be, we may welcome it. Everybody talks about Yoruba having one voice. We need to have one voice. We need to have
Yeah.
this. Nobody has told us how to arrive at it. So the only thing we get is, let us all come together. Let us form a coalition. Let us do this. And they have been doing it, but it has been splitting up. So the question comes back to, is it necessary? So it is not necessary. What is
Okay.
necessary? What is necessary is to have a pathway towards the goal we are going to. So it is that roadmap that any organization or anybody will attach itself to. And if you don't agree with the roadmap, then just, there's no problem. But you see, even if we have 100 roadmaps, like we have,
Yeah.
because each organization talks about Yoruba self-determination, and I'm sure they will have their ways of arriving there. They will have
Yeah.
their roadmaps. Okay, so even if you have such 100, that it is the 100 roads, and the Yoruba say, one road does not lead to the market, or not come water.
I'm not
But
gonna
at
watch
the
that.
end of the day, only one road will reach the market. Because if the 100 roads start from here and they are going to the same destination, the fact that they are going to the same destination ought to unite them into one road. But despite going towards the same destination, they are taking different roads. At the end of the day, they might not even arrive at that road. But usually, one road leads to the destination. So the major problem is defining what road to take. Defining what road to take. And once that definition is made, then those who agree with that road will coalesce around that road. And any disputes that emerge from within will be treated within the context of the road being taken.
Right.
So, so it's like a quote unquote what I would call democracy of the liberation movement. Where yes, was it Mao or somebody who said let 1,000 flowers bloom or something like that. Yeah. So we will solve the problem by not limiting it to yeah, it would be good if the various student movements can contextualize their struggles within the national question. The period we are talking about, the synergy between the lecturers, the academic staff union, and the student movement, and all that, uh, the level of intellectual discourse
Yeah.
that the students brought to the table was very high. Why? Because they were exposed to different kinds of ideas and knowledge and so they were able to, and they had examples that they can always point to. Steve Biko and the Black consciousness movement in South Africa was a major influence at that time, at one period, not to talk about the ANC and all the rest. So but now the situation is not the case. So to to come under one umbrella, I don't know. But I think the major issue that we face is in defining the road to take and aligning the student movement along that direction.
Yeah.
They are, because of course we know what the educational system has become. We know they don't, when they go to classes now, if they go to classes, they will be hustling to get their grades and exams and not bother too much after spending how many months at home and all that. So
Yeah.
everybody will be scrambling for academic survival, as it were. So the only place they have for what we call political activism is outside the campus. And then most of the academic staff members themselves are also disjointed in a way. I'm talking about political activism now,
Yes,
not in
definitely.
terms of their professional jobs on campus. So that's why I said we have to address that disconnect between their pan Nigeria or countrywide struggles and the context that it is taking place in. So uh, I believe yes,
I mean, because one of the things that are missing
yeah,
in some of the narratives of
yeah,
the Yoruba Liberation movement is this intellectual
yeah,
discourse,
yeah,
which, when we engage, like the students, that's what I mean, that's what they bring in. Because
yeah,
when you get some of the movement, I mean, each group has a right to come up with what they believe could lead to the liberation of the Yoruba people.
mhm,
But when you assess some of them, you are completely lost because you can't place it in any um, intellectual
please, yeah,
prism.
mhm,
So, for instance, and I just want to make just like this is just as an example. We had a movement which was just threatening people. You don't agree with us, we'll hit you, we will shoot you, we will destroy your place and go. When you look at, maybe we don't know the type of studentship these ones are, but at least maybe one or two of them, we know they went to school. So when we look at the student activities in those days, national consciousness and liberation
ideological
movements and co.
ideological clarity also.
Yes, so you can't actually put them side by side with some of this narrative that is coming out. all that have been coming out, although it's gone a bit down now.
Yeah.
So, and that is what prompted some of the questions that where are the Yoruba students?
Yeah.
By now, like you mentioned, in those days, you will have had symposias and having them organized, calling maybe, let's say, even people like Professor Wale Soyinka, throwing challenges at him to come and discuss something about the Yoruba or calling, I mean, something that you can follow, something that other people could identify with. I mean, those people that cannot identify with the other parts of, yes, we will hit you if you don't agree with us. So they will be able to identify with this other section of the movements. And despite what you said, that most of these groups are led, or you still have some people that came out from student activism that are deeply involved with them, although not officially as students, but they are involved. I mean, and this intellectual aspect of the narrative is missing. Then, I mean, it calls for questions, and that's where we start looking at where are our students in Yoruba land.
In fact, okay, go ahead.
So, in terms of those students, because except we are saying that, I mean, which unfortunately we may have to agree with at some point, that the same way that education has gone down, and when we talk about education, it goes beyond somebody just sitting in the classroom learning maths or this thing and then pass it out. It's really about getting into education, both the social and the
physical development,
the educational aspect of it. So to have that wholesome education, and that's what makes students different in those days. Now, the group we're talking about today, some of this group, even the students that are there, I mean, postgraduate students, I mean, some of them were in student activism maybe back in the 80s, back in the 70s, 60s, and co. So except we're saying that standard of education has gone down grossly. I mean, just the same way that unfortunately also, we've noticed that where, I think, was it the DG of NYSC the other time, who said that, I mean, if some of our students, graduates and co, that even you give them simple test, they can't pass it. Some of them cannot read simple sentences and colon stuff. So except we are saying that, okay, this is the same problem that has affected our education as a whole, has also affected the student movement. Except we want to agree on that, I find it a bit tough that people that were in universities in those days, I mean, that's area where students are very, very active, and they engage with social political discussions and co, and they are very, very impactful. And today, some of them are in these groups, but when you look at the narratives of those groups, they're not really bringing out any more sense or what you can reasonably sit down and judge that it will lead us to something tangible. How do we relate?
Yeah, okay. If you recall, I said there was a synergy between the academic staff, some academics,
yes,
in those days, and the students. So there was an interaction and the development and what we can call battle of ideas between the student movements and what we would call the quote-unquote radical or progressive teachers, the lecturers, those that, among them were the ones sacked by Obasanjo. So there was a robust development, nurturing, and exchange of ideas between the students on campus and quite a few of these lecturers. So when the lecturers retired and all that, and then the student movement and the Nigerian situation got worse, then the replication of the student movement, that is the progressive side, let me use the word progressive side of the student movement, also went down. Now, having said that, those that were formerly active in the student movement, who now found themselves in the leadership positions of several of these organizations, were unable to play the role that their own lecturers played. Yes, those lecturers and teachers were on campus and they had daily or almost daily interactions with the students, and the students look up to them for intellectual food, let me put it that way, and engagement. In fact, it was a badge of pride for one to be identified with one lecturer or the other lecturer, but yeah, and stuff like
Yes.
that. Okay, so those who graduated from that era, who are now leading the student movement, I mean the various liberation groups,
Yes.
did not and still do not replicate the functions of those lecturers. Because yes, the educational standard has gone down, the campuses are what they are. There's really nothing to write home about and stuff. But because of the experiences of these students who now found themselves in leadership positions in these organizations, they ought to see themselves in the role of their former teachers
Hmm.
among the students. So when they form organization A, one organization, and the leadership happens to be former president or activist on some student organization on campus, the next
Yes.
question would be, how is that person relating with the students, even from previous school, or not to talk of other schools? So I won't put the blame or the problem on the educational system. We know it's rotten and it can't produce any good fruit. I will put it rather on the leadership of these organizations for their failure to see themselves as the replica or as the alternative to their lecturers, the academic community, so that they will provide the necessary intellectual platform for engagement. And again, even having said that, there's a general lack of, I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything. There's a
Right.
general lack of intellectual depth in the struggle itself, that is the Yoruba liberation struggle itself. Why did I say that? Because, you know, uh, like you said, some will say if you don't do what you are doing, we are going to shoot you, we are going to kill you, we are going to burn you down, and all the rest of it. So there's no intellectual depth that
Hmm.
has been introduced into the struggle for liberation. So everybody just comes up with whatever catches their fancy and uh, pursue it. And that is because most of them are unable to engage. That's why I say that's why it is important that looking at yes, we are all in Nigeria and there's a Nigerian problem, but that Nigerian problem expresses itself in a nationality, national context. So for them to be relevant, They have to engage that ethno-national context. But what we find most of the time is when we talk about Yoruba this, Yoruba that, they will rather start saying Yoruba religion is superior to what they call foreign religion. And let us get rid of foreign religion. They won't even interrogate Yoruba religion itself. Or they will say, all the usual stuff. This politician is bad. This one is better. That one is this. We don't trust this one. We must. So there's no intellectual interpretation and interrogation of the entire essence of liberation. So that's why every day they split up from 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you look at the reasons for splitting up, it is not because of any divergence in ideological
Ideology, yes.
or intellectual terms. It's always about somebody who is trying to be dictatorial, or somebody who has cornered all the resources, or somebody who wants to use us for, so it's all banal. Let me put it that way. So when you have that in a society, I mean, we can't. I mean, let's be a little bit charitable with our students. I mean, the students cannot. They have to go with what what is presented to them. So that's why I said. I mean, one is not appearing arrogant or trying to be arrogant, but sometimes you even discover that even some of the lecturers we have today are also within that category. So there is no, unlike the previous experiences where, I mean, student movement in those days, they will be talking about revolutions in 1871 in France. They will be talking about things like that, but the entire Yoruba movement, I'm leaping into Yoruba now, the entire Yoruba movement today is not even talking about the national liberation struggles in Catalonia. They are not talking about Scotland. They are not talking about Scotland and the Scottish who want to run away from England. We won't allow you to leave. But I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So these are issues that ought to be on ground because, one, they are contemporary. They are contemporary issues. They are not talking about even Ethiopia, where the entire national liberation struggle is taking place and they are fighting and killing each other over the place. So, unlike before, where we know about South Africa, we know about Lumumba in the Congo, where Karl Marx, even some groups who call themselves young socialists this, young socialists that. So, Russian Revolution, Chinese, they will be quoting Mao of. They will be talking about Frederick Douglass and all the rest of them, but you don't find it today. Why don't you find it today? I'm not saying we should be quoting Mao or anything. No, I'm talking about contemporary issues that even the whole essence of, like, let's say Yoruba Nation now, for example, and those who want to kill anybody. There are examples where people have demanded their sovereignty in our contemporary times. And there are issues they are facing, there are questions they are answering, and there are processes they are following. Why are we not discussing it within our own context? Why do we think we are a super, and that is one of the problems in the Yoruba struggle. We think we are super, specially created by God. I mean, those who believe in God, or those who don't, they will say they are special people, and that we are isolated from the world. No. So the whole isolationist and what I would call superiorist argument is what has led to this impasse. So that is why someone will come and tell you, well, if you don't follow me, I will kill you, or they will be cursing each other out. They will be, because of that over reliance on that isolationist. So there's no intellectual depth to the liberation struggle. And as whether we like the Fulani or hate the Fulani or like Buhari or don't like Buhari or stuff like that, it's not the issue, because
Mm.
the Nigerian state has its own intellectual basis. We may not like them, we may not disagree with them. They have their own, they have Kuru, for example, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. They study all these things. And it is based on, and they visit all the places, go to the governor and they talk there what they want to talk. But they have research, they do all these things, and it is based on those things that they formulate their policies. And then we say they have come again, no, they have come again. So I'm not saying we should set up research institutes and stuff like that, but the need for an intellectual paradigm shift is
Mm-hmm.
very necessary for
Yeah.
not only the Yoruba, but especially among the Yoruba.
Yes, because the point is, if which I think we've identified that there will be some form of discourse or narrative that everyone would want to identify with, even if they don't want to say openly that yes, I agree with these people, but one will begin to see that alliance. However, when we look at the Yoruba Liberation movement and the other liberation we're talking about, we've even seen some of the Obas who, although they are supporting Yoruba liberation, but they don't want to identify with them because of the sort of narratives they have. And that is when we begin to sort of look for the students, because usually this is their area. But we also need to know, or we also need to take it from this direction, that when we talk about students in higher institution in Yoruba land, they are also the bulk of our youths who will have impact, whether it's through election, assuming yes, they get their PVC, that means they're going to really determine a lot. Also in Yoruba, let's say we have either a regional Yoruba setup, they are still the same youth that are going to form like a bulk of the energies to kick off with. So if they are so scattered now, or we can't really lay our hands on them and see that impact, then it's sort of a bit worrying. But let's put it this way: as we are now, when we talk about the over 100 groups and co, and it's happening every day. I think within the past 2 weeks, we've found one that broken and form another one. So things will keep going on like that, and which is very, very unfortunate, because in Yoruba, one of the words of the saying is that because if you have the different types of dangerous snakes that follow each other, any hunter will run. So this splitting, and it's so just trying to find the right word to use for that, because it's also disturbing, extremely disturbing, that you have a group splitting from this group because they will claim this group is doing so things. Somebody is becoming dictatorial, or they've cornered their fund, or they want to take glory for something. They will form another group. In less than 6 months, this same new group will split, and it will still be the same thing. Oh, somebody wants to say he or she is the one in charge, or and it keeps going on like that. But in terms of bringing all the groups together, maybe not under one umbrella, but setting up a roadmap. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me that it's going to be a tough, a tough position if these groups are all having different ideas, and we've not been able to map the ideologies together to say that, okay, in order to get to this end, this is where we should go first. And from there, if we're able to cross this obstacle, or if we're able to cross this point, then we move on to the next. And each of those groups in their own corners, they are putting in their own bits of effort to cross every milestone that has been set, which is completely missing now. So the question from there is, we have this youth, which in quotes we are putting as students, whether they are still in school or they've just passed out, their population, so to say, and they have their own impact.
Yeah.
And they are in all these groups. Is there a way to attract them to not for them to leave those groups, but is there a way to attract them to begin to start doing something different within the groups where they are in?
Yes. The thing is this: in every struggle or every quest for liberation or stuff like that, like I said earlier, there's always one road that will lead to. So when you look at all the various revolutions that is, let's talk about armed revolutions now.
Yeah.
You look at the various revolutions, Cuba, even the liberation movement and stuff like that. Even in the Portuguese colonies, like in Angola or Mozambique, or even in Zimbabwe, where you have different groups talking about independence and stuff. It is only one group that is able to achieve that, and stuff like that. So it is the capacity of that group to challenge the problem that will allow for that kind of relationship to take place. So the first thing is identifying what the problem is. And even like we said, let's take a look at Scotland. Okay, for how many years they've been talking about Scottish independence, Scottish independence. They went to election, they got devolution, they do this, they do that. Now they are saying even after losing the last skinny, they want another one.
Yes.
So that was the advantage of the SNP, the Scottish Nationalist Party, or National Party, because it has been consistent in that demand, various turbulence and all that, but it mapped out that way. I mean, it didn't start out with saying we want Scottish. I mean, they started out as a party.
They started out as a party.
Lost elections, became a minority, were in the doldrums, but they still kept on until this point. So now, along the way, you now have Alagba Party, who is led by, I consider him my favorite. I like the way he handled Britain. What's his name? What's the Alex Salmond? Although many people say, but I like him. Anyway, that's a different story. You have then you have the Green Party. You have some other parties that came up all the way for various reasons, but they had no choice but to follow that path that had been established by the SNP.
Yes.
So if the SNP had not sustained itself, we won't be talking about, we probably won't be talking about Scottish independence or referendum today. Okay. So you go to Catalonia, you find a similar thing happening, that even at a point when they were disjointed, they had about 3 or 4 different parties. And they went to the elections, the last elections in Catalonia. when they had the referendum and they scattered all of them, and then they went into elections. I think 3 or 4 parties, all talking about Catalonia independence. So they went into the election and then they discovered that they were scattered. So they had to come back and then say, let us unite behind a program, a project. And so if you consider all of those things, it boils down to, for the Yoruba now, we are talking about autonomy, federalism, Yoruba sovereignty, and all the rest. Except the politicians who have been and continue to say, okay, the best way for Yoruba is to win election and take control of the center. And they are pursuing it, along their way. Those who are saying, that even if you get the center, it will solve the problem. We have to address the fundamental issue of the Nigerian state. And then then they will say, no election, no restructuring and all that. But none of the organizations has so far succeeded in sustaining that momentum. So because they cannot sustain that momentum, it leaves room for all this splitting. And why can't they sustain the momentum? Because of their own, again, it's not a question of arrogance, so lack of intellectual depth. And I will say this, you find some of these organizations that are led by academics, that are led by people who were involved in the pro-democracy, NADECO, and all the rest of them. So then the question is, why are they unable to sustain that thing? Then once you start interrogating that, then you will discover what I have just said, that there's a lack of intellectual understanding of the problem. Everything is based on, or most of the things are based on emotions, Yoruba exceptionalism. We are Yoruba people. God did this, we did that, we did that. Yeah, nobody is disputing that. So once you are able to say, yeah, this is the problem, I think part of the solution is already there. So the question, and okay, I'm not using this to simply promote what we are doing, but we can use it as an example of what I have just said. This thing has been going on for some time. So there was a time when, we met with different groups and stuff like that. And we put up our proposal. This is how we should approach this thing. And everybody just went gaga. No, it's not possible. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And, there was a lot of argument. Even some of them said they had conducted their own, what they call opinion poll.
Right.
And this is the result of their opinion poll. They have done this. Okay, so we said, okay, fine, you have conducted. So where does that take you? What do you want to do with it? If it's a question of opinion polls, the politicians can organize a counter immediately if they want to. So I use that as an example that while the politicians are very clear as to where they are going, yeah, they want to win elections. They will form parties, they will form alliances, they will even throw themselves under the bus and just to get to that point. So those of us who are saying, no, that is not the way, are yet to understand or are yet to come up with our own pathway, whether contrary to the election or whether in association or alliance with the elections or whether it is even completely different. So because of that, that is why, when they split, you never find anything to hold on to. Yeah, why did this guy split? All it is about somebody who is sitting on some money, or somebody who
Yeah.
wants to sell us out, or somebody, all kinds of stuff like that. Why? Because there's nothing concrete in them in the first instance to say,
Mm.
yes, I'm splitting from this organization because they have deviated from our pathway,
Wow.
which is so, and so. They now want to do so, and so. And I can't go along with that because of the dangers inherent in. So if we have a
Mm.
coalition now, for example, and say, let's say we have a coalition on Yoruba referendum, like that is where we are going. I'm using this as an example. And
Yes.
somebody comes in and say, well, let's put the referendum aside. Let's go and support one of the candidates will be, or if okay, to make it clearer, like we said, we are not opposed to election. So if Tinubu wins, that's okay for us. In fact, we will encourage him to win. He's a Yoruba man and he's a
Yeah.
Yoruba person. So let's leave him. So somebody now comes and say, no, we shouldn't do that, or we shouldn't. We should support Obi or Atiku, for example.
Mm.
Okay, fine. What is the position of Labour Party on what we are doing?
Oh, well. Yeah.
What is the relationship between the Igbo and the Yoruba historically and contemporarily? So when you answer these questions, definitely there can be a choice. But if the person now says, no, Tinubu is this, Tinubu is that, Atiku is this, Atiku is that, let us give this guy a chance because of equity and this and that and that. And if we split along that line, it is no
Yeah.
longer whether I have obtained money from anybody or somebody hasn't obtained money from anybody. It will be strictly on that basis that we have an ideological difference.
Difference.
If it will lead to a split, fine. If not, we work it out. So that's what I'm saying. But you don't find such things. Why? Again, this is my reading of the
Okay.
what I call Yoruba exceptionalism. The Yoruba Liberation Movement is anchored on Yoruba exceptionalism. What is Yoruba exceptionalism? We are uniquely created by God. We have 400 plus one Orisha. Foreign religion are inimical to our progress. We need to go back to our Kinikon. We
Yeah.
are, as if we are the only people in the world. So once you predicate your pursuit on that exceptionalism, it is a sure route to failure because there's nothing exceptional. I mean, all human beings are exceptional. It
Yes.
is what you make out of that exceptionalism that But when you now anchor the entire struggle on that exceptionalism, then you will forget the reality and the context you are facing. Because you are being decimated, your whole existence is being threatened, and all you can offer is that you are exceptional. If you are exceptional, you won't be facing the problem you are
That
facing.
won't be happening. Definitely.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thing must go beyond that. So that's why I said yes. I hope I haven't diverted away from the question. That
Well, still on track.
yes, it may be welcome. Yeah, let's get together and do this and do that. But the main priority is in agreeing to a pathway. And it is that pathway that will guide us and lead us into what we are doing. So that even if anybody wants to corrupt that organization, you
Yes.
will either have to corrupt the entire pathway or fail in the process. Because whoever wants to corrupt it, we have to give way to those who are not corrupting it. And it will be very clear. So if the person collects money from somebody to promise that he's going to corrupt it and he didn't succeed, then he will have to go and deal with the person who paid him. That's their own problem.
Mhm.
So, but once we have that pathway ready and available to everybody, and
Yes.
it will be easier to organize around it. So the emphasis will no longer be organization, I'm the chairman of this, I'm the president of that, or I'm the general secretary of this, I'm the general secretary. It will be how to sustain that pathway towards ensuring victory. So you can be the field marshal of your own organization, fine, but bring your organization and align it with the pathway. That is how to remain relevant. And that's how I think the problem can be resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before we go to the next thing we'll be discussing, in terms of, I know that the students probably are off now because of the strike and co, but in the nearest future, when they will come back, or maybe even now, as your own group has a sort of a strategy to reach these students.
Yes. Well, let me say yes. And I won't say no, but yes. And this is the reason. Like I said, there is a synergy between, they say university is a town and gown and all the rest of it.
Yes.
So, our first priority is how do we get the Yoruba intellectuals or educated elite into the referendum process to agree with our pathway, so that if we have a majority or even a significant minority that can pursue it, that can push it, it will be easier to push it among the youth, among the students. But if we say we are the only ones going to do it, oh, before you know it, we will run out of steam. But
Hmm.
if the landscape does not even agree with what we are doing yet, how do we influence the youth? Because it is what you take to them that will influence them. But those
Sure.
who are taking things to the youth themselves are confused. So how can they influence anybody? So you now have what Fela will call confusion breakbone.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So because the kind of opposition we have encountered, even among the educated, you won't believe it.
Well,
So and then you see the youths when you encounter them, when they are encountered, some of the things that some of them are saying, you will just be shocked. Educated youth, so I'm talking about those who are in university.
yeah,
You will
university.
just be shocked. Some of them will even tell you they are not Yoruba people,
Well,
yeah, that they are Nigerians. You point examples to them and they say that is past. This is our time. Okay, this is your time. What do you have for your time? Then they will say, you just these old people just leave. You have messed it up. Okay, how do you want to address it? Nothing.
mm,
So we take the position that yes, we must engage our intellectuals, our educated people, our public intellectuals, so that it becomes a mantra, as it were, so that anyone can now take it anywhere and be able to defend it. Because I don't have to be in any campus before the issue is debated and discussed. So, but when you have, like I said, you have people that say, "Look, this is the way to do this," and in these many organizations, that was why we parted ways with some of them. That the way you are going about this thing is not the way. This is the way. And then they will start about Yoruba exceptionalism. And then we say, okay, go ahead and do it. And we are now seeing the results now. We are now seeing the results now.
yeah.
Uh, So it's a I don't know how to, but it's
It's
something.
a
Yeah.
catch 22.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we don't want to place ourselves. Some can do that too, and it has happened in many instances. We say, okay, say we
Mhm.
don't have anybody to agree. We will be the only ones that will be doing it, and this is our program. And that some have come when let me another instance before we go off the subject.
Right.
The bill for referendum and everything we have written about it, that we have published, that we have
This,
sent privately and publicly. It was clearly stated that it is the Houses of Assembly that will conduct it. Can you believe a professor will now come and say, okay, so how are you going to conduct the referendum? A professor, that is the kind
yeah.
of problem we face. So people are literally blinded because they don't read. Because they don't read.
Hmm.
So, and that is one of the major issues that
Yes.
we face. People don't
Okay.
read. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much. We will discuss further probably as your group continues to engage with the intellectuals.
mm,
I think probably that will flow to the youths.
yeah,
Let's say, for instance, if there's going to be like a symposium or like a conference, and then and you have maybe some of these intellectuals. I mean, to an extent, there are still some of them around that students will still follow and
yeah,
respect. I mean, somebody like Professor Wale Soyinka and co.
mhm,
If they are holding any conference, or I mean they attract
yeah,
that block
that
of
block of,
students or youths and co. I mean, and there's many of him like that as well within the Yoruba space.
yeah,
So we'll keep track on that. We'll go for a short break now,
yeah,
and when we come back, we'll be looking at the letter that was written by Professor Akitoye to the president of Nigeria, Major General, although he said he's retired, but
it's not
Muhammadu
tired.
Buhari, who is probably on his way out of the presidency by 2023.
Yeah,
So, uh, those that have stayed with us, thank you so much for being with us for this time. We are going for a short break now. Remember, we've been talking about Yoruba students and Yoruba liberation because we are yet to see the impact of the students in the liberation movement. But we'll keep tap on that. For now, we'll be going for a shorter break. When we come back, yes, we'll be talking about that letter. Please do stay on with us. Right, welcome back. It's OY Media right here in Scotland. We also have OY Media in Ibadan. That is all your state in Nigeria. My name remains Samuel Oludari Jirokon. And today, I'm still with Alagba Femi Odedeyi. He's been on the program with us talking about Yoruba students and Yoruba liberation. But at this session, we'll be talking about Professor Akitoye's letter to the president of Nigeria, Major General Muhammadu Buhari. You are welcome back on the program, sir.
yes. Thank you very much. Glad
Right.
to be back.
Thank you. Like I've told our people, for that's in the case of those people that are just joining us, we've been talking about the students, and we'll keep up with that. But at this section, we want to talk about the letter from Professor Akitoye, Banji Akitoye, to uh, President Muhammadu Buhari. The force majeure, because I want to take it from there for historical context. The force majeure that was declared by Ninas against the Nigerian government. Professor Banji Akitoye and others were part of it, in which they've come to a conclusion that Yoruba land and other peoples there are represented, or they were represented in that, as at that time when the force majeure was issued, they believe they are no longer under the Constitution of Nigeria. So, in quotes, the Nigerian state has no responsibility for them, and they too have no responsibilities for the Nigerian state. But as things have been going on, we also had, and I think we've shared it on this program at a point in the past, where a group that Professor Banji Akitoye belonged set up a sort of a court case against the Nigerian government to stop the focus was to stop, and I think it's still going on. The focus was to stop the Osun state election, the Ekiti state election, that they are not constitutional. Unfortunately, that hasn't come up with anything. The case is still there. And the latest is this letter that has been written by Professor Akitoye and others in his group, signed by others in his group, to President Buhari, telling him to set up a sort of a committee or representatives of the party, representative of the Nigerian state, to meet with them to discuss Yoruba exit from Nigeria. I mean, let me take your general view about this whole process, not just limited to the letter, but all those processes that we've gone through. Is this last one the next stage of the force majeure? We have the force majeure, we have the court, then we have this. So that would be the first question. But I want you to look at it as a whole, that movement, that transition, and let's have your view about it, sir.
It's quite unfortunate that they are doing more of the same things. Okay, they have the force majeure. At that time, they said they are going to give an ultimatum to the government. I think it was 60 or 90 days for the government to do this and do this and do that. They were ignored. But it was within that 90 days that at that time they were known as is it Yoruba World Congress or Ilana or whatever. Maybe they are formed Ilana at that time. So it was the group that split up, because that group now left Ninas, and they suspended each other and all that. So they said they were no longer part of Ninas. So at that point, their constitutional force majeure with Ninas became dead, because they now went to the same court. Because if you have a contest about the legality and validity of a law, and then you go to that law to come and rule on, some other things, you have already lost your case. And that was what happened. So they split up, and some of them stayed with Ninas, and they came out with another group. And that group split up again and all that. So that's why I said it's still the same thing, that when a contest because it's a political contest for power, and you don't have your own means of forcing yourself on the table. Earlier on when we were talking about students, that's why I said there's intellectual paucity. The Yoruba Liberation movement lacks intellectual dimension. It's not an insult on anybody. that yes, you can say you want to write a letter for propaganda purposes and all that, but then if you want to write it for propaganda purposes, you don't make demands you can't keep, because it
Right.
defeats the purpose of the propaganda itself. Because if you tell them, like they did in the constitution of within 90 days, if you don't do this, we will do this. What did they do? Nothing. This one, they said, okay, by September 30, you must set up a negotiating committee to come and negotiate with us for the liberation of Yoruba land or whatever it is. Okay, so if they don't do anything by September 30, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Maybe they have, last time they said they wrote some foreign governments and they give them some letters and all that. Maybe that's what they are relying on. But that's why I said the problem we have is that our political intellectual leadership are deficient, in the sense that whether they rely on somebody from outside or they have their own internal forces and all that, let us look at what is happening in Ethiopia. Let us educate our people on how the central government in Ethiopia is trying to destroy even the ethno-national federalism, regardless of what the Tigrayan people did when they were in government, that they are now seeking that regional autonomy for themselves, and the government is waging war against them. So how many of our Yoruba people are aware of what is going on in Ethiopia?
Yeah.
How many of our Yoruba people are aware of what is going on in Catalonia? When the government of the Catalonian government, when the government of Spain cracked down on the Catalonia people, some of them escaped to Europe because they recognized the regional government of Catalonia. The
Yes.
political context within Catalonia itself led to the change of government in Madrid, such that the new party that came to power was forced to negotiate with Catalonia, and all those who were jailed because they conducted a referendum were released and pardoned. How many Yoruba people know of these things? We have said it in Scotland. Even when they failed the first time, they say we are still going ahead with it the second time,
Yes.
and that it will even become the center for election and stuff like that. So how many Yoruba people know these things? So that's why I said there is intellectual paucity in our struggle, and that is what is leading to all these ultimatums that cannot be carried out. So my general view is, you know, sometimes people do things out of, okay, there's nothing else to do. What we will do? Okay, we'll write him a letter. If it's charitable, he will read it. If it's not charitable, he will probably give it to one of his aides. If they want to be very bad about it, they will just ignore it.
Yeah.
And then, you see, again, when we talk about contextualization, they gave Buhari an ultimatum of September 30. The election campaigns are going to start officially on September 28th. A Yoruba person is a contender, whether we like it or not. And the Yoruba movement is giving Buhari an ultimatum to come and negotiate Yoruba. I mean, so you see, when we talk of intellectual paucity, it's not just an academic thing.
Yes.
It is an understanding of the contradictions and the dynamics of the political process. So if Buhari wants to be very mean, if he wants to be very mean and be a dictator, what he will simply do is, okay, you give me an ultimatum on September 30, we are going to have our campaign on, and your man is in the front runner. So he will appoint some people who are going to negotiate with these people. If they now come to negotiate with Akintoye, then the candidate suffers, because
That's
they say, look, oh, you don't represent your people now. And knowing that the negotiation is going to go nowhere,
mm-hmm.
But they will. So by the time they do the elections in February, they will finish your candidate. It should be your people are negotiating. Let's finish the negotiation now.
And the negotiation will go on forever.
Forever. And by May, when he leaves government, the new government that comes will say, well, I have no hand in setting up that negotiation. No. And we
That's
don't
it.
even believe in negotiating. So that these are the kind of things we are talking about. That even if you say you don't believe in the election or that the election will lead anywhere, there are better ways of engaging the political processes
Yes.
by seeing the dangers in what you propose. They are not looking at the dangers. They are just, So that's my general that's my general view.
Okay. Now let's come in now to specifics.
Yes.
The I know that different Yoruba groups have written, whether those one that wrote to the United Nations to say, okay, this other group, please don't listen to anything from them. They are not representing us and co. To the ones that have conducted maybe like the opinion poll, the ones that have set up splinter groups in the US, probably in the UK as well. But can we really say, because I think this is where the whole thing boils down to, that there's any specific group in Yoruba land today that can say it's representing the Yoruba people, and any government, whether within Nigeria itself or outside Nigeria, will be comfortable in sitting down with the mindset that, yes, by talking to this group, I'm talking to the Yoruba people. Is there any?
Yes, unfortunately, yes. And this is the group.
Oh.
It is for now. It is the APC. Why? Because the Southwest APC and the governors are elected, essentially by Yoruba people. Their terms will come to an end in May next year. In fact, it was Akeredolu during their party primaries who said the presidency must come to the Southwest and that they are representing the people. Yes. So they can make that claim that after all, they voted us into power. That is the yes part of it. The no part of, so if this group that now rise, Buhari now say, but that's a partisan this and that, the election was not this, the election was that, they have 5 million signatures and all that. Then the question is, between your 5 million signatures and those who are elected, who is representing Yoruba people? Then we now have to go back to what Akeredolu said when they declared constitutional force majeure. And his question was simple. Where did the Yoruba people decide on anything? They did not provide any answer at that time.
Yes,
so now we are back full circle. So if that issue comes up, the APC, at least in the Southwest, will claim we represent Yoruba people. They are people, they voted for us and we are in government. And it is legitimate. I mean, the political context of whether the constitution is this or that, that's a different question. But people voted for them, like the governorship in Ekiti and Osun State. They voted for them, so they represent the people. Now, you are now saying because you have 5 million signatures, you also represent the people. Fine. We, Yoruba Referendum Committee, we don't have 5 million signatures. We have about 11,000 or two. We also represent the people. Yes. We may be in the minority, but some people actually signed our petition. And they cannot be ignored because there is no threshold to say that if you have 1 million or something like that, then we run to see how you have to give us time to get to 1 million and stuff. So anyway, so we also can play, and not only because we have the petition, we have also made moves on behalf of the people to the Houses of Assembly. So we also can claim that we represent Yoruba people. So the PDP can claim, at least the governor in Oyo and now Osun State,
The Osun now.
Osun, can also claim they represent at least a segment of Yoruba people. So you now have 4 different claimants. So the only solution is let us put it into a vote and see who actually represents Yoruba people. And that is what we are seeing as far as the Yoruba Referendum Committee is concerned. All these writing letters and all that, and this and all that, okay, they can be used for propaganda purposes. But what gives it teeth is what we call the Yoruba referendum. And this is not a question of are we going to leave or yes or no? No, because we haven't reached that point yet. That's why, like I said now, when they have this Oyo and Ogun State, Oyo and Osun State, they have PDP. The rest, they have APC. So we are already split. Among the 5 million that they have are people living in Osun and the state and all the different. So what we are saying is, how do we first of all have to agree that we want that regional force,
Right.
regional legitimacy. It is that regional legitimacy that we now negotiate with anybody we want to negotiate with. We don't need to, nobody, we can't say because we have a group that claims to have this and this, then you can appoint people to negotiate on our behalf. It's not done. How about those other groups that you split away from? Don't they have people? Have they agreed with your own people? No. So to avoid all kinds of crisis and conflict, let us vote whether we want a regional voice or not. Once we have that regional voice, anything we want to do will be according to that regional voice. That's what I said earlier on about having a pathway. That once you have that regional voice, everything becomes attached to it. Anybody that wants to leave or split away from that regional voice, it will not be because somebody collected money from somewhere. It will be because that voice is not doing what it's supposed to do. And it will be so clear to everybody because the parameters will be laid out. It's like, again, we talk about the SNP. When they had that dispute within the SNP in Scotland, should we go for it now? Should we not go for it now? Should we do it after the election? Should it become a matter of election? So they were able to resolve it and put it on the table. And they are put, so all these things, that's why the importance of having that regional, that's why we put our referendum as a regional thing. Let us all agree to have a regional commission that will act on behalf of Yoruba people. So there will be no dispute as to who is representing the Yoruba, who is not representing the Yoruba, because the commission is legally, legitimately, and validly empowered to represent Yoruba people. So all these running around saying they want it, well, I don't. That's their own problem. But it's not the way. That way is not the way, and they are not solving any problem by doing that.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I think that's the actual point where there's no group that is, let's say officially. I mean, we know that the politicians, because they were appointed by the people through an election, a democratic election, and they are the upper hand. So they could easily present themselves as representing the Yoruba people. Why also we have all groups that have their own. Yes, I know this might be, it will just to take your view about it.
Yeah.
It might not be something that you can fully say, yes, this is what they are thinking about. That there's this troubling question that aside from your group, which obviously is engaging with the Houses of Assembly as the representative of the people in the democratic process that is right on now in Nigeria. The other groups, or let's say majority, and I'm talking about over 90%, if not more, seem not to want to have anything to do with these elected representatives. So what do you think is or are the reasons?
There's no reason except intellectual laziness, like I said. I mean, at this point, with this kind of question, one will have to be a little bit more direct. There's no, and it is not insult, it's just, an opinion and analysis. There's no way you can change the reality by ignoring that reality. That is, the reality is you have elected people running your affairs, but you don't like what they are doing, you don't like how they came about, you don't like anything about them, but they are in power, they are there. So if you want to contradict them, you have two
Yeah.
options: raise up an army to remove them from power, or raise up a political situation that will remove them from power. So if we say we want to raise an army to liberate Yoruba land now, we know no matter how foreign support that we get, we know where it will end. So don't even let us discuss that for now. Let us look at the political situation. Yes, we don't like them for whatever reason. They are this, they are that, they are all kinds of stuff, no problem. Then, but they are riding on a certain legitimacy which was provided for them by the existing political reality. So what you need to do is to puncture that legitimacy. How do you puncture that legitimacy? You have to engage them. And the engagement is not one way. There are those among them that will be supporting you in the back, but saying something else in the front.
Wonderful.
You have to isolate those ones. There are those that will be providing you internal information on how to subvert them. You have to isolate them. There will be those who are even deaf and blind, who won't even want to say anything. So you have to isolate. That is the nature of political engagement. You look for your friends or those who are close to you among your enemies. You look for those who can collaborate, even in an opportunistic manner. Say, okay, oh, this guy, we know that this is where he's going, oh, but he can serve this purpose. Then you present him with that purpose, just that purpose, so that he can achieve that purpose, so you can move on. Once he achieves that purpose, you can say, Oga, follow us or find your way. But you have already achieved your purpose. So these are different ways of engaging them. But you can't come out and say they don't matter and you want to replace them or you want to get them. If they don't matter, why do you want to remove them? You want to remove them or you don't want them because they matter. It's just that what they matter about is not what concerns you or you don't agree with them. So you can't just ignore them just like that. So that is the short answer to the question. I will call it political myopia, or again, I will call it this is my own personal point of view,
Yes.
Yoruba exceptionalism. We are better than the rest of them. God created us better than the head of them, and blah, blah, blah. So, and really, it is intellectual myopia. They lack the intellectual capacity to address the question in a strategic manner. That is why they make ultimatums they cannot enforce.
Right.
That too much emotionalism is put into it.
To the struggle. Thank you very much for. So, in your view, come September 30, we shouldn't be expecting anything dramatic.
I mean, it's like when we said about that court case, when
Yeah.
they went for the court, we said if the government wants to be charitable, they will keep on postponing it until who knows when. If they want to be firm, they will just throw it out. But what happened? They just simply threw it out. Okay.
Yes.
So September 30, first major, when they did it, no, the government didn't even respond. And
No.
then it is the organization that responded by splitting up. So, like I said, September 30, Buhari might just say, look, how many months do I have left? 6 months. Say you want to create problem for yourself, go ahead. Me, I'm not going. So you just ignore them. If he ignores them and the elections go on apace, and perchance the Yoruba candidate wins, then what are you negotiating? Are you going to say you don't recognize his victory?
The presidency.
And wins the presidency.
Or will it just change then that, okay, now that we have the
Then we
presidency,
have that president to we are come and negotiate how you want to live now. The man will just tell you you must be out of your mind. So I mean, what will happen
because
on after September 30? I don't believe in predictions or all those people that go about Professor this, all those crap. Uh, Charlatanism, that's what I call it. So it is more realistic to look at various options, what will happen, lay out the options, but while laying down the options, you know the reality. We know the reality. Nothing is going to happen. Now, when we say nothing is going to happen, it also depends on how that nothing is going to manifest. Like Buhari can just say, that's your problem, and look the way he's looking. Or he can say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to get rid of the Yoruba politician. Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
set up a committee to go and meet with them. While they are negotiating, the candidate will be campaigning. Then they will say, are you people
uh,
serious?
that your people
And now your
probably
people are there.
probably in the interviews, media or some of the campaign platforms that are done by the media, probably they will
Yes,
have asked him that, but then your people are already
are already
negotiating to leave the
negotiating
country.
so
So
what are you campaigning for? Go and sit down. So by the time everything settles down, he will have lost the election. And then the government will say, the new
mhm.
government will say, I have no hand in that thing. No. We have to start again and all that and all. So that is a possibility. Another possibility would be uh, for the candidate to come out and say, are you guys out of your mind? Although I'm sure as a
Yeah,
politician, he won't do that. But so anything, but bottom line is that it is a waste of time. Like I said, if they want to use it as a propaganda tool, they don't need to put in an ultimatum that you must
absolutely.
respond or do this. All they need to do is to write a look, if things don't change, we are determined to go. And if the election hold, it doesn't hold, this and this, then we know what we are talking about. But all these, there are Yoruba people that are considered to be credible that are talking about an interim government. That's their own view. They
Yes.
will say, no election, let us have an interim government so that we can readdress the situation.
Hmm.
There's no alternative. Whether it happens or not is immaterial, but that's their suggestion to the thing. You can now query the need for an interim government or why, and stuff like that. Then you have a ground to engage them. But this one, there's no ground because they have already foreclosed it by saying you must do certain things by September
So,
30th.
so time.
So we have to wait until after. So maybe they have their own negotiating committee in place. So, but so it's a waste of time. It's an exhibition of political myopia.
Right.
So
Thank you. And we're trying to round up now. I think it's during the week the British, no, the U.S. embassy, staff from the U.S. embassy visited Atiku
Mhm.
Abubakar, in which some people have started to think that could it be that they're already sensing the way things will go. While we had the Peter Obi, Labour candidate, that some people, in fact, I was unable to get the video in. There was, or there's a particular Eastern elder from the extraction who was saying that they need to the Igbo people from the east, that they need to stabilize their position, and he believes that that position is not going to be in Obi's presidency. And what he meant was that Obi's votes, even if they get votes in Lagos because of the Igbo population, that in other places he won't get the vote. So at the end of the day, he will not win. That is his projection, that he will not win. And with that, the Southeast, I mean, which is traditionally PDP, so to say, will have lost the Igbo voice for negotiation. So what I'm saying is, from his point of view, they should look beyond the election, just voting. They should actually look at what will be the resultant effect
After the vote.
after the vote. What's going to happen? And this, he was talking about, you now need to talk about interests, which we know politics is about interest, which is what made Buhari also to talk about the 95% and the 5%. So, and the man was saying that with the way things are today, we have the three major ethnic nationalities being represented in the presidency: the Yoruba, the Hausa Fulani in the north, and of course the east, which is the Igbo. But the man was saying that if we know we're not going to win, and which is so clear because of where the population,
yeah,
will it not be better for us to align with a side that we know that, okay, we are not winning, but if we assist this person to win, then we can always negotiate our interest in that, rather than going all out and losing and not being able to actually do anything. Which I think to an extent, your group's strategy, which goes beyond election, and that is, it doesn't really matter who wins, although if the Yoruba person wins, it makes the case easier. But in the real sense, it doesn't matter who wins. If the Yoruba people are able to push for this bill to be passed into law, because then that will be the negotiating tool, whether it's Obida wins or it's Atiku or it's even Bola Tinubu itself. It's not the election is not an end for the Yoruba from your own position of view. Now, as things are now, and that's why I started with the visit by the US staff to Atiku. I don't know whether in the future they're going to visit Ahmed Bola Tinubu as well, because I mean they're planning to have the largest embassy in Lagos, despite the fact that Lagos is not the capital, not the federal capital of Nigeria. So they have their reasons. So maybe in the future they're going to visit him as well. But in terms of these three that we have now representing the major ethnic nationalities, and this is not a prediction or a projection, but in your views, how do you think that the votes will map out?
Well, it's a kind of analysis. Yeah, it's not a projection, it's not a prediction, it's not a prophecy. I mean, like
Yeah.
I said, all those engaging in that concerning elections. So I'm not
Yes.
saying there's no prayer, but when they start coming about who will win and who will not, so but we can look at it from these angles. One, the US, Europe, Britain, and blah blah blah. They will make all these visits because they are also collecting intelligence that they can plan on.
Right.
That they are making their own plan. If this guy wins, this is what we know about his plans. This is what we should do. If this one, if now they may have their own candidates that they will say, if you do this, we will encourage you to win and pour this, and they can also do that. We have no way of knowing. But then we also look at what is the power configuration in Nigeria. Like we have said before, Buhari has done all the things that he's doing essentially to benefit the North generally. Hausa
Yes.
Fulani hegemony. The PDP went out of its way to make sure that a Northerner becomes his presidential candidate.
Mhm.
So that shows that at least a section of the North wants power to remain in the North.
Sending the love.
And Buhari has laid the foundation for that. Same thing could have happened in APC, but for the smartness, in quote, of some of the northern governors, that if the ACN also comes up with a candidate from the north, that will just spell disaster for them, both in the west and in the east. So they quickly turned and put in this guy. Okay. So from there, one can assume or one can say that the north does not want to give power. So if the North, and we know Buhari was almost, he was, if not for the northern governors who turned around, Buhari was going along with having a northern candidate for the APC,
APC.
right? And if you watch his demeanor during the APC primaries, you will know that the man was not happy as the way things were turning out. So one can safely assume that they don't want power to live in the north. But how are they going to achieve it
Mhm.
through the election? Either Atiku is rigging to win massively or whatever, whether they vote or they rigging, if it is convenient for them, or the election comes into a stalemate because you have three major candidates. They are supposed to have 25% in 24 states. All the three of them can have that 25%. Then one will now have the largest number of votes. So you
Mm.
must have the largest number of votes and 25% in 24 states. So the possibility is that someone will have the largest number of votes, but will not have 24 states. Another person will have 24 states and have not a larger number of votes. Another person will not have either 24 states or not. So they will now be forced into a runoff because that's their constitution.
Okay.
Among the runoff will be between the person with the largest votes, but not 24 states,
24
and
states.
the person with the 24 states with the second vote. So the third person will now be the what Azikiwe called the bride, whatever they call it,
Beautiful bride.
the beautiful bride.
Yes.
So the Igbo guy that was making that analysis might also have been thinking along that way,
Right.
that he probably considered that Obi will be the third guy who will not have 24 states and who will not have the largest number of votes. So they now have to team up. When the runoff comes, they will now have to team up with either Tinubu or Atiku. Let's say they are the two ones. That's probably his thinking. So if that scenario will work well for sustaining control of the North. because what they will bank on is that if Atiku is one of the two that will do the runoff, and
Yeah.
if Obi is the third party to the runoff, they can
Mm.
always work with PDP because that's been their tradition. When the runoff comes, to now push PDP in, and on that basis, they will now negotiate what they want for themselves. So that is one, and then they will leave Tinubu out. Okay, Shebi, we conducted it, you lost, so go and sit down. So that is a possible scenario that can, unless Buhari has been told in no uncertain terms that APC must not lose this election.
Mm.
And then, the West, like we said, they have the largest consulate in Lagos. I don't think they will want any crisis to be in the South. I don't think so. And then they have the embassy in Abuja. They won't want any crisis. So they will be doing their own arm twisting behind that. Maybe they have visited, I think they visited Obi or Obi visited them. I don't know which one. Maybe the consul or the somebody. And they have been talking all around and stuff like that. So all of these things will be playing in the background. But the general thing is, if the assumption is that the North does not want to leave power, the best thing for them now is to have a stalemate in the election, have a runoff, and then
Okay.
have the East to team up with the North,
With the North.
which is a possibility. But that is why we are also saying in our own case that our referendum protects us from that. By the way, we are also trying to convince other nationalities to have their own referendums so, for the same
Yeah.
reasons. So we don't need to be relying on politicians working out deals among themselves. So that whatever the outcome is, we are already certain. The negotiating team that the Akintoye group is saying now, we already have it in place, valid, legal, and legitimate. So nobody will come and say who appointed you. We, the Yoruba people, have appointed those who will negotiate on our behalf. So that is the essence. So as they are, that is why I said the politicians know the road they want to take to where they are going. Unfortunately for the liberation movement, we are still caught up saying Onokon Woja. There is only one road that leads to the Oja, not 100 roads. We all know it. The politicians know it. That's why they stick with the electoral permutations. No matter what, they stick with the electoral permutation because that is the only road they know. The soldiers know it. That's why they rely on military coups. If the political atmosphere does not favor a military coup, they won't embark on it. But they
Yeah.
know that the only way they can get power is to overthrow the existing government, which has to align with the political situation in the country itself. So they know it. So why are we now saying, for in our own case, 100 roads can lead to the markets? You already defeated yourself. So that's my that's
Yeah.
my own
Assessment of
my own
how things could go.
that's most likely what will happen.
Okay.
Inconclusive, and they will now have to go into a runoff, and there will now be an alliance between the North and the East, unless the West comes out boldly to. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. The last question we'll be taking on this. I mean, we're not going to discuss it extensively because it's something that is reserved for maybe for
Later.
next 2 weeks.
Okay.
But you did made a bit mention of it, and then it also comes at the backdrop of a question which some people have asked before, why they were. I mean, some people that have seen what Yoruba Referendum Committee is doing, the steps that is being taken, and they were asking, okay, why is it that it's only being done for the Yorubas and not for other people and co? You did mention that you are also encouraging other ethnic nationalities to also embark on the same strategy to come up with, a sort of narrative, and then also engaging with their state houses of assembly that covers where they've got that majority of the ethnic nationality, just
Yes.
like we have in Yoruba land, those 6 southwest states. So, I mean, briefly, you've met with some of these groups and co. So briefly, how is it going? Is this something they are open to?
Yeah. So far, I believe they are open to it. Of course, it's one thing to be open; it's one thing to actually do it.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I think the discussions are going on very well, and we expect that they will also take similar steps within their own context. We can't dictate to anybody outside Yoruba land that the only thing we agree, or that we can agree on, that we can sell to each other, is the form of a federal Nigeria. That is why we said the new Nigeria we are talking about will be a federation of nationalities. So each nationality will appoint or select or elect its own representative to that council, the presidential council. Nigeria will be run by a presidential council. So the Yoruba will send their own, the Igbo, everybody will send their own. When they get there, the
Yes.
council, they can now rotate who is going to be president or not among themselves. But we will have established the parameters for that council. So that is what is general to everybody. But in terms of how we actually go about it in our different regions, it is the context in that region that will determine how it should take place. So for us, we say the referendum is a good thing to start. Although it's actually a good thing because all the other states are also atomized, as Yoruba land is atomized. You have 5 states in the east, or 6 states. You have 4 or 5 or 7 states in the south, Niger Delta. Middle belt. We don't even know, they are just spread all over the place. So it's always better to have that voice, that negotiating voice as a starting point. Of course, we can't force it on them, but what we are saying is that it is a template that they can. Someone used the word domesticate, use within their own context as to how to go about all these things. But that's the general formula, and we are discussing it with them, and we are hopeful that the discussions will yield fruit,
Yeah.
and that it can become the alternative political model in
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria, so that it's not just going to be elections. Somebody said doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is
Yeah.
insanity, or something like along that line. So we have been having elections and this and that and that, and nothing has happened. So what guarantees do we have that anything will happen with the next elections? Now, having said that, the only guarantee we have is when we, the people, actually mobilize and put our alternatives on the table, regardless of who wins that election. So that's what we are saying. And for us in Yoruba land, like we said, we are not opposed to, if it were Osinbajo that want the same thing, if it were Fayemi, the same thing, Tinubu, the same thing. So we are not bothered about the person. We are
Right.
bothered about establishing that Yoruba imperative. So if Tinubu wins, for example, then he can decide to send the army against the Yoruba people. I
Yeah.
mean, which is, or you can say, okay, okay, you guys, now that we have won, where do we go from here? But we already have something to put on the table. So, and if it will be who wins, of course, they have said they want to retain Nigeria the way it is. So, we have no problem. We already have something to negotiate with. And if it is Atiku that wins, we already have something to negotiate
To
with.
negotiate with them.
Uh-huh. So, so that is why we say we must directly intervene in that election through this process. Professor Akintoye will have done better.
Right.
This is not a question of disrespect or age or anything. Professor Akintoye would have done better if he had thrown his weight behind the Yoruba referendum.
Right.
His voice is higher or louder than mine. I mean, you know, if we both want to address a press conference, they will probably listen to him rather than listen to me, which is okay. But if he says what I should say, it makes a lot of difference. So we don't need any ultimatum or anything like that today. We can give our own legislators ultimatum.
Okay.
Why? Why? Because if they don't get to that ultimatum, we can rally our people to go and meet them in their chambers and say, oh yeah, today, not today. Let them now go and call the police and army to drive us out. That's a different thing. So if people like that, and it's not that we haven't told them, we have told them, we have explained everything to them. But like I said, I mean, they have their own reasons. So that's what we are saying. If we rally around it and make it the issue in
Yeah.
Yoruba land, it will make a lot of difference.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today. Viewers, those that have stayed on with us, thank you for keeping on with us. I've been speaking with Alagba Femi Odedeyi, and he's from Yoruba Referendum Committee. He's always with us every 2 weeks, looking at what's going on, social political issues, and of course, with focus on the Yoruba referendum bill, which is before the Southwest states of assembly, houses of assembly, and that covers from Lagos to Oyo, Ondo, Osun, Ekiti, and with, of course, the Kogi and Kwara just right at the background in taking the first step, first of all, to go through the houses of assembly that are fully in the hands of Yoruba people, and then pushing for a referendum for those in Kogi and Kwara. So I mean, we've always said that the Yoruba people in Kogi and Kwara, they are not left out of the strategy. So thank you so much. If anybody wants to reach Alagba Femi Odedeyi, the contact email is yorubaref@gmail.com. I mean, in the course of today, we've spoken about Yoruba students and Yoruba Liberation, actually looking at where are our students, because this is the time that we need intellectual discussion, we need ideological paradigm shifts for the Yoruba Liberation movement. And we believe that our students, which obviously are the bulk of our youth too, are more than capable to get into the ring now and do what they know how to do best in relative to socio-political discussions and movement. We've also spoken about the letter by Professor Banji Akintoye to the President of Nigeria, Major General Muhammadu Buhari. I mean, it's something that we've spoken over and over, that except we do things the way it should be done, we will always be ending up with the wrong results, and we can't be doing things over and over again. From the views of the Yoruba Referendum Committee, we don't have any business with the president at this moment. Those people we have business with are our representatives back home there. Those are the representatives at the state houses of assembly, not the National Assembly, but the ones that are right with us in different states. And we've mentioned this severally. These are the people you don't have to look for transport money or go through the danger zone to go and look for them in Abuja, because they live among us. We meet them at parties. We meet them in our places of where we conduct our religious obligation, whether the mosque or the church. We meet them there. They live within the same area as us. So those are people that we can reach. And that is the focus, that those are the ones we should be dealing with now, and not not the presidency. Of course, they've issued another deadline for the 30th of September. Fingers crossed, we'll be waiting until then. But every of those, like Alagba Femi Odedeyi said, every of those deadlines that will not be met and nothing will happen is just making a big mess of the movement. And of course, lastly, we were talking about Yoruba referendum's engagement with other ethnic nationalities. And I think right from the start of the Yoruba referendum presenting these templates, one statement that we've picked right from the start is that that template will not only be useful for the Yoruba nationality within Nigeria, it will be useful for others, but even beyond that, this is a template that could be domesticated across Africa. We know that with the mapping of Africa by the colonial masters in those days, there were lots of ethnic nationalities with different values, different culture, different traditions that were bundled together. And we've seen how there has always been conflict from one corner to the other. So it's a sort of a template that the Yoruba Referendum Committee did not limit its strategy during the thought process to what we only work for the Yoruba, but what we work for the entire Africa to bring peace into that region. And it's on that basis that we are bringing this to a close. We're hoping that our students will resume soon. Some of them also hoping that they will come on board, and then we can push that through that line, through that network. Thank you very much. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to have Alagba Femi Odedeyi again. Until then, this is still a call for the Yoruba elders and the Yoruba people in general to push for the bill that is before the Southwest Houses of Assembly to pass the bill into law. If that is passed into law, it's a legitimate instrument that we need to have at hand, whatever happens in 2023, whether there's a military coup, or we have an interim government, or there's even an election and the president is produced. The election for us in Yoruba land is not an end, it's a means to an end. But we need to have something tangible that is a legitimate tool, so that we won't be writing to any president or begging them or visiting them come and to appeal to them to do this and this for us. There has to be an instrument that is our demand of what we want within Nigeria, and which we could use to negotiate with the other nationalities. And again, this is the 2022 Yoruba referendum appeal.
Ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o, tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé, ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe, àgbà ìlú aṣòro bí èwe. Ta ni yóò padà táyé ṣe o, ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o, tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé, ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe àgbà ìlú aṣòro yéwé. Ta ni yóò bá dàtà yé ṣe o. Ẹ̀yin àgbààgbà ìlú kí ló dé o. Tẹ́bí ń ṣòro bí èwe kí ló dé. Ẹ̀yin ṣe èèyàn bí ọkà èyí ti ṣe àgbà ìlú aṣòro yéwé.
All right, Alagba Femi Odedeyi, I will just take just 1 minute from you, or maybe about 30 seconds to close up.
Yeah. Thank you. 30 seconds is even, I mean, you have already summarized the whole thing. And I hope that people, those who are listening, they will share what we have said so that their involvement will become more prominent. And we hope, yes, for our students, that they will start taking more interest, not only in Yoruba liberation struggles, but in other struggles, similar struggles in Africa and in the rest of the world, to broaden their knowledge, to let them, to put them in a situation where their mind will be strengthened and expanded so that they will know what challenges that we are faced with. And I hope our elders, like the song said, will come back to what we have presented to them before and see that as a more meaningful way of addressing the problem. We don't have any issues for now with Abuja or the Buhari or whoever. Our issue is with our own political system within our own region and how we can get them, engage them to be on board of what we are doing. The whole question of Yoruba sovereignty, Yoruba nation now, and all the rest of them, these are questions that we can always address once we get the basic things going. So, you have said it all, and I thank you and appreciate the platform. And those who are listening to us, we thank you, and God will bless all of us in all our endeavors.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay, just 1 minute, sir.
Okay.
You have to take
just a break. Yeah.
Just trying to get the
Okay.
technical parts here. We always have that.
Okay.
Just 1 more minute. It does happen this way at times. Right, listeners, sorry for that short technical break. So we will. Now it's one of stuff here that is. I'll probably exit from here.
Okay. Or should I exit first?
We've practically finished the discussion. Um,
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. Shaking go off.
Okay. Attempt letting go off.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. The mouse.
Yeah, true.
Because it's wireless. But
Okay.
then it was still on. So I was wondering where
Oh, she was on by now. She was live by.
I'll get back in now and cut it off.
Okay.
Still.
Okay, can stay on phone, but she can leave studio.
No, still on.
Okay.
Still on.
Okay.
I'll exit.
Okay.
So.